Richardson takes it. Oh! A goal from the heavens for Kieran Richardson.
Really, he could be in here. He's all alone. And he's gone. Sensation at Wembley from Sunderland. McKinney.
Phillips. Good try. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Edwards goes for the spectacular.
Corner comes in. Provena. Yes. Oh, it's about Provena.
His cross is a cracker for Quinn. He's done it. He has done it.
Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. Sunderland started the season perfectly in almost every way, winning 2-1 at Wigan, against Wigan, and then followed that up with a 2-1 win against Port Vale tonight in the Caraboa Cup. However, we'll come back to league form on Saturday, our first away game of the season, many people's first away game for a long, long time, and it is the MK Dons, a scene of some quite good scenes, shall we say, a couple of years ago, and hopefully they'll be exactly the same. To preview the game, we've got Liam from MK1 Podcast, who is making his hat-trick. It's your hat-trick today, mate. Don't know whether you knew that. I've got to give you a match ball, but how are you doing? Are you all right apart from that?
Yeah, I said the match ball. I'll take the 3 points on Saturday. That'll be all right, thanks. But yeah, no, I'm good, thanks. How about yourself? Yeah,
not too bad. Getting by. Happy with Sunderland start of the season. Another wee win tonight, even though there was no stream available to watch it for anyone. Looks like Patterson made a fantastic save. So yeah, I was going to say all's good in the hood there. I don't think I've ever said that in my life. So, but MK Dons, obviously, we're going to be getting into a lot of different things here because there's been one or two things that have happened at MK, shall we say. But I want to start straight from the top. 3-3 draw at Bolton. What did you make of the game?
Very entertaining, first of all. I think it's too many 6-goal thrillers, and it's always an entertaining trip to Bolton, usually. Overall, yeah, really happy. Obviously, the situation we're currently in isn't the greatest. No first team manager, no first team football staff really to coach the actual players. So we're relying on Dean and Ray Lewington to coach the players on an interim basis, which isn't exactly ideal, especially when Ray Lewington's meant to be retiring. But yeah, the spirit of the lads was excellent on Saturday. Players like Haram Boateng came out of being in the wilderness, as he put it, not being in the squad for 18 months, and not had a squad number for this season, and came in at the weekend and scored the third goal, which ultimately got us a point in the end, which could have been even more if we had defended it better. But yeah, and Lewington's an absolute legend at the club, and he's a real leader in that dressing room, and I think the players aspire to him a lot. And that's shown on Saturday by the way they performed for him and for the fans travelled up, which is near enough 400 in the end, which, considering the situation, I think is quite commendable. Some fans won't think that. I think we had some comments after the game, but hey, listen, you got no manager managing your team. What do you expect? But yeah, really pleased. And yeah, look forward to Saturday.
It's a vastly different club, I think, as well. I mean, let's be honest, MK Dons history because of various reasons, which I won't need to go into, means that it's not exactly the club that attracts many fans, apart from people from MK. So therefore, yes, that does make, to me, that makes a lot of sense. Bolton's a tough one to start with because I think, obviously, had Ipswich came up against Morecambe. I think most people have seen that as the performance of the week. Obviously, the Bolton MK game was the game of the weekend, I would say, based on entertainment and goals scored. Bolton have just been promoted, but Bolton are a big fish in this particular pond, even though they've just came up. Would you have preferred to play them at a bit of a different time because you don't really want to play a newly promoted side on the first day of the season at their own ground, do you?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And I think with Bolton, it's the case of they're looking up rather than down this season, even before Saturday. They kept the majority of the League Two squad that got them up, and they added to that and the likes of Bakayoko coming from Coventry, who's played in League One for years and years. So players like that can add to the quality of that squad. And players like Owen Doyle, he's a proven goal scorer in multiple leagues. So he's also going to get you pretty close to where you want to be. So yeah, I mean, playing him another time would have been ideal. And of course, playing him at home is probably even worse. Had been at our place, I'd been a bit different. But I think the next two games, especially the one against Ipswich, which we'll touch on here really, but it's quite an important one for us because they're still a team that's meshing together. So it could be probably the best time to play a team like Ipswich, who have a lot of players to come in. Whereas a team like Sunderland, which I'm sure we'll get on to, is it's a team that's lost a lot of the deadwood, in my opinion, and has now got a proper squad who can really compete at the top end of the table.
I suppose we're speaking with hindsight, which is always wonderful, like 2 or 3 days or 72 hours after a game. He took the lead twice in the game, and then obviously a 95th minute equaliser. I think a point is a good point, especially considering the circumstance, absolutely. But was it a little bit frustrating to lose the lead twice?
Well, it's not exactly ideal, is it? I mean,
yeah,
I anyone wants to lose leads.
Was it nice to concede in the 95th minute? Is what I'm asking you, isn't it?
No, but listen. It's MK Dons. This happens all the time. Your manager leaves a week before the season starts, and your coach staff leave as well. So this is what happens. But no, listen. I think if you ask most MK Dons fans for the game, would you take a point? I think 90% of them said yes. So yeah, I'll take it and move on.
It's quite an interesting one with the backstory to Boateng, because that was something I obviously came across at the time. He didn't start. I think the majority of your new boys started in the middle, obviously Twine and Robson. Boateng came on. What was the kind of the background to that? Because it's a zero to hero, isn't it? Pretty much overnight for him.
Well, from the eyes of Russell Martin, yeah. I think with Boateng, he was always, it's a really good League Two player. He couldn't take a step up to League One. And I think Russell Martin echoed that consensus opinion and didn't really play him. As I mentioned, didn't give a squad number for the season coming up whilst he was manager. Then, of course, he left. And funnily enough, Dean Lewington had a similar experience with a previous manager, Robbie Nilsson, who exiled him from the squad because he didn't really agree with what was going on at the time. So he went to train with another EFL club. And funny enough, as soon as Nilsson left, I think it was sacked in the end. Lewington came back and, it was the best year it's ever been. And funny enough, Boateng has a good relationship with Lewington. I think he related to him based on that experience. Came into the squad on Saturday, got, I believe it was 20 or 30 minutes. And of course, scored the third goal, which could have won us the game. He didn't in the end. But I think that just shows the resilience and the passion of the bloke to, be at this club for so long, go out to clubs like Cambridge, for example, have a really good season at Cambridge last year, and come back into this side and put a performance in for us, and hopefully he'll do the same going forward and be a part of the squad.
I feel like I've teased the conversation about Russell Martin, so I might as well get onto it. I think Russell Martin's a funny one. I didn't expect him to go. I don't know how you would have felt with it, but obviously he's gone, and the problem we've got at the moment is, at the time of speaking, he hasn't yet been replaced. You touched on it before. I think a lot of people aren't aware that it wasn't just Russell Martin that went. He kind of basically took the entire backroom staff with him as well. He was making waves. He was impressing me. I thought he was building a decent project, or MK were building a decent project with the way they played, the signings that were made, which we'll come on to. But we're about a week on from his departure. What were your immediate thoughts when the links to Swansea were there? Do you think he was going to go?
I think immediately I was a bit shocked, to be honest, because it all kind of started at the Spurs friendly, or in the build up to Spurs friendly, when it was links that Swansea approached him, and we didn't really believe it because we had a similar situation in Bristol City previously, as to which they apparently approached him, he turned them down, and she was like, okay, whatever, fine. The days went on and on. The interest, seemingly grew and grew. And by the time all the Dons fans on train down to Bournemouth for the Saturday game, Russell Martin had been officially approached. And from our understanding, took the job already, but was still scheduled to, manage a team at Bournemouth, which was a ridiculous situation. I understand the club tried to act professional as possible regarding the situation, and they were told certain things by Russell Martin and the media were to understand the point that he turned them down again and was speak to them after kickoff, after a third approach apparently. But I think, from my opinion, that was a complete lie, because I think in most Dons fans' eyes, he already took the job at that point. So yeah, I think it went from complete shock of him taking the job to a bit of anger, and then this acceptance that it's happened and we have to move on. It's a real shame because, as you mentioned, the product he's building here I felt really special. And I think the chairman also thought that Pete Winkelman, I think it's not official, but it's believed that he spent a club record fee on Mo Isa. He's probably the biggest transfer that the club's ever had in terms of players coming in and money spent. So the chairman went all in on the actual process itself, and the men leading it, I should say, have ditched it a week left. Week left to go until the season starts. There's been kind of some news this afternoon regarding some names. Nothing's official yet. Peter Brooks mentioned that he thinks one man's going to get it, and that looks fairly promising from what we've seen. But we only really talk about official stuff, so we'll wait and see what happens there. Hopefully it's announced before the Sunderland game. And if it is that person, he won't be in charge of that game because he'd have to self-isolate because of where he is in the world compared to the UK. But yeah, it was a shame. It was a real shame. And, it's just a difficult situation to take, but it has happened to us in a long time since the Di Matteo days, which are over 10 years now. So yeah, it's just difficult to take, really.
It's an odd one because obviously, to the people who haven't listened to obviously the MK1 podcast before, I've listened to the interviews you've done and the podcast you've done with Russell Martin, which is, it's not completely unusual these days to get a manager or a chairman on a podcast. It's more media savvy managers do it. But when I listened to it, it was kind of, you listen to a guy who genuinely had 2 or 3 years in his mind of where he wanted to go with it. He joined a specific club for a specific reason. He was bringing in sort of some certain players last season, which is when I first listened to the podcast, that he thought we were going to progress them, and also young players to progress them as well. Why do you think he did go? Because you've obviously done those podcasts, you've done those interviews, and I'm not alluding to the fact that you know the inner workings of his brain, but you've probably had more contact than most. And from the outside looking in, he seemed a very happy man. And that played a factor in my decision and my thought process that he would turn Swansea down. Then he did. Why do you think he chose Swansea over MK?
Well, first of all, I think from, as you said, speaking to him for hours on end and listening to him hours on end, I think some stuff that he told us it probably was a lie. And that is hard to take because of the podcast we've been on him, and it's gone from my mind sometimes whether what to do with those episodes, keep them up or whatever, because I don't know, it kind of, we've been the Milton Keynes Don's podcast, and it's not us, it's other podcasts as well, and other content creators regarding Milton Keynes. It's difficult to take because it feels like it's ruined your credibility a little bit, because you're reporting on the club itself rather than a not top 20 or a training ground guru who they're more EFL based and more just football based. It doesn't really matter to them if Russell Martin just leads your club unexpectedly. So yeah, there's that. But I think with Swansea, I got it. The main thing I got was the progression of his career going there, because the previous managers that have been there, the likes of Brendan Rodgers, Roberto Martinez, Graham Potter, most recently, they've all got on to bigger things like the Belgium national team, for example, Brighton, Leicester City, of course, with Brendan Rodgers. So I think with Martin, he's a very passionate and ruthless man. And I feel that as soon as Norwich or a big Premier League side that he feels he could develop come calling, he'll do exactly the same way he's done to us. So I've pre-warned Swansea fans several podcasts. It will probably happen if it comes to it. So I wouldn't get your hopes too much on the Swansea way and playing this football for a long time, because in a couple of seasons he could well be off if Swansea aren't, projecting where he'd want them to be, which is probably the Premier League and beyond.
Now, I mentioned my opinion of this on your podcast, but I'm going to assume that because you haven't released it yet, that the people listening to this might not have heard it yet. But there's been a lot of chat about stunting the progress. Like, the man who is running the show and the men around him have gone. The progress that they've made, this kind of project that's been put together, has now disappeared, and now MK can kiss goodbye to potentially going in the playoffs. That's the way it's came across from the outside looking in, and I can probably understand why. First and foremost, before I go into my thoughts and opinions on it, do you think that departure of Russell Martin and his coaching staff has the potential to stunt the progress of MK Dons? And most importantly, do you think it will?
Well, the big question is who comes in. I think if the man comes in that I think is coming in, then no. I think this squad proved on Saturday that it's more than good enough to compete with some of the best teams in the league. People may laugh that Bolton's a good team in the league, but I think they will be top 12 this year.
Yeah.
I think, we've mentioned they got a squad for it, and I think they proved on Saturday that they're going to fight for every point. I know there's perfect opportunity to show it in these next two games with Sunderland and Ipswich. And these two teams are going to be the top of the league. We want to be top of the league, and I think we should be with this squad. It's more than good enough, to be honest, the amount of talent that's in it. So yeah, it's down to these players once again to prove everyone wrong in the fact that, we don't need Russell Martin is at MK Dons. These players are MK Dons, Liam Sweet's MK Dons, Dean Lewin's MK Dons, and the fact that it's their opportunity to, start season well. And one thing Russell Martin was right about is you want to play the big teams straight away, because you can prove you can make your mark on the league, you can get the big teams out of the way with and start fast. And last season we didn't do that. That's what cost us. And we finally kicked it the gear out in November, December time. It was too late then. Whereas this season we had the real chance with the players we've got to right our wrongs from last season, admittedly without the man in charge, but it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I think it doesn't halt us at all. I think if anything, it could actually project us to be better than expected.
Because I used the example of Lincoln on your podcast as how you can sort of recover from it. Because I think Lincoln are a better team than they were when they had Danny Cowley. I think Appleton's done better with them. He's improved them. He had that steady in the ship moment, which you might need to go through. But is that kind of maybe not the blueprint, but is that an example of what you hope could happen at MK Dons, where you can bring someone in who can implement his own ideas, but also drag and continue the project with his own ideas and get you higher than Russell Martin might have done over the next couple of years? Yeah,
it's about, because at the end of the day, Russell Martin has coached his players really well. That's the one thing that no one can really deny, that they've been molded into these players who can play a completely different style now and do it in multiple ways. So if anything, this should be an opportunity where a manager can come in from a different background who maybe has a similar style to Russell Martin in terms of liking possession, liking to play with attractive attacking football, but at the same time, have the experience to which he's not going to make the same mistakes that Russell Martin did in terms of, not making possession count and taking too risks when it's not necessary and costing us games like we did against Blackpool and so many other teams last season. So yeah, this appointment's bigger than a lot of people think, and I think that's why the club's taking a little bit of time about it. I think it's very close to being done, which it could be done before Saturday, who knows? But yeah, I'm hopeful. I really am, actually, and I think it's taken me a little while to get over it. I think some Dons fans still haven't got over it just yet, which is completely understandable. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to see what happens.
I think football fans are tribal, aren't they? I'm still not over Darren Bent leaving us about 12, 13 years ago because he went to Villa. So I think, unfortunately, with Russell Martin, as much as there might be some fans that thank him for kind of what he did and the slight progression that he made with yourselves, I think leaving when you were 13th in League One on the cusp of a brand new league season.
I definitely don't thank him, that's for sure.
No, I mean, I can't imagine that he's going to be wanting to come on, or you're going to want him on the podcast anytime soon, put it that way. Although you never know, who knows?
Well, we had that question. Well, funny enough, we had that question before, and yeah, it's a real touchy subject. I think we'll wait for the invite to come first before we do anything.
Let him set up the Zoom, not you. You've sort of touched on before. I'm not going to press you on who you think it might be because I don't think that would be fair. Who would you like it to be, ideally? What kind of names, when it first happened, when you first started thinking about who could we bring in? Who were the names you were thinking of when it dawned on you that you actually did need a manager and the kind of Russell Martin leaving was sort of forgot about, if that makes sense?
Well, the two people that really wanted, I think, without looking at any bookie odds and what we could possibly do, the first one was Michael Flynn from Newport. Admittedly, it was a very unrealistic name. I just really like him as a coach. He did really well at League Two for many seasons now. He's got a proven record working with young players and excelling them. So yeah, that made sense to me. Jody Morris also made sense to me. Former assistant of Frank Lampard with Derby and Chelsea. has had reasonable success at EFL level, and obviously has really good success working with younger players at Chelsea. And we also work with Charlie Brown, who's one of our strikers, who is a really talented prospect. Outside of that, I think a name that grew on me a bit was Stephen Bradley from Shamrock Rovers. Plays a very similar style to ourselves in terms of possession-based football, and has had a really good couple of seasons at Shamrock in terms of win the league of the season prior and the cup. And I think a lot of fans warmed to that name once they did a bit of research about him. The name that has come up, which I don't want to say the name because the club might get iffy about it, but he's part of the City Group. He's been working under a club under the City Group for a little while now. Has worked on New York City FC as well, so he's been in that group for a long time. And he's works on possession also, a bit like Bradley does. But he's very similar to Russell Martin in terms of his philosophies. And I think that's why the club are really into him, because it's essentially a plug and play pretty much in terms of Russell Martin, which is what this squad needs, because they've been trained to play a certain way. And in my opinion, it's a win now squad in terms of, yes, he should be aiming for top 6 and higher. So I think if this guy comes in and can basically just carry on how he would, doesn't really need a pre-season or in betting period, he can probably in a couple of weeks, have the squad playing the way he wants them to and getting results. And I think that makes the most sense. And I think the chairman will like that a lot, because obviously he's got a lot of money invested in this squad. And I think even after a season, some of them could be saying, I want to be off because the gaffer's left that I was meant to be playing for. So yeah, this guy makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad the club's taking a bit of time over it, because they could have easily have just rushed and appointed God knows who, and could be reaping the consequences of that.
Jody Morris was the original favourite, wasn't he, if I remember rightly? Because I thought, fair enough, that would kind of make sense. But it's an interesting list of candidates. I mean, I'm going by Sky Bet, which tells you who I bet with. Bet responsibly, carefully, whatever it may be. But Liam Manning's the favourite. But Michael Duff, obviously Cheltenham's in there. John Terry's in there. Stephen Bradley, who you've mentioned. Jody Morris. It's a bit of a weird, bizarre list, isn't it? Would Jody Morris, the original favourite, have been someone you would have favoured? Would you have welcomed that in?
Well, I think the real reason Jody Morris was the favourite was because apparently the club contacted him pretty much straight away. Mm-hmm. So I think Jody Morris was up there in terms of, because the club have come out and said they didn't really want to approach a manager at a club currently, just because of how it makes them look as a club based off what's happened with Russell Martin and Swansea. But I think it must have got to a point where all the candidates that they wanted didn't really buy into it. And obviously Jody Morris falls into that category. So it's got to a point now where they need to target managers who are at clubs like a Bradley and like other people in the market who are up there, that they wouldn't have to pay an extreme amount of compensation for, but also I think targeting that type of club that they are, I'm not sure the ramifications would be too harsh. And I think that's maybe why, whereas this has been very public and the club whilst the club are trying to make it less public as possible, they'd rather it be it that way. Some things just come out, and with the amount of sources that people have these days, things get out so easily.
You can't keep things private for too long, unless you're Danny Ings signing for Aston Villa, which came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
The good thing about any manager that comes in is he's coming into a side where a lot of people who watch League One, study League One far more than I do, would say MK probably had the best transfer window. Troy Parrott was obviously a good signing. Ethan Robson, but a lot of Sunderland fans think he's all right. Yeah, people seem to really like Ethan Robson. I'm not entirely sure on him, to be honest, but Mo Isa and Twine, both players who, obviously Mo Isa needs no real introduction to anyone who watches League One, but Twine, great play, played for Swindon last year against us. I think it was in November-ish time. Had a free kick from about 35 yards out there, just pinged the bar. I think he scored one on Saturday again, didn't he? So
yeah.
I don't want to call him a dead ball specialist because that sounds like he does now else, but he's a good player. He's been a good signing. And Troy Parrott, obviously, he's came in from Spurs. I think he's someone who doesn't really necessarily need an introduction either. Before, obviously, the Russell Martin situation happened and that became the main focal point of conversation, you must have been really happy with the transfer window.
Oh, yeah. It was, I think it has been our best window ever in terms of signings. I think most Dons fans would agree with that. Obviously, yeah, Mo Isa, believe club record fee on him. Just bagsman, basically. Scored the weekend, knows where the goal is, what we need pretty much. Same with Troy Parrott, was really unlucky not to score at the weekend. I think it was cleared off the line. Again, he's kind of a nice compliment to Isa. We saw at the weekend anyway in terms of what he can do with the ball. Ethan Robson's an interesting one. Obviously, as you mentioned, the fans know him quite well. He is probably going to start Saturday. I will tell you now, because one of our better players, David Kasuma, is out with a hamstring injury for a good little while now. So he'll probably play that pivot role. And he did really well against Bolton on Saturday in that pivot role. Ethan Robson did. So I'll be very surprised if he got dropped. And he looks pretty tidy. Obviously, part of that promotion winning team at Blackpool, who obviously did really well to get promoted.
Yep.
Josh Martin's an exciting player on loan from Norwich. Of course, that was one of Russell Martin's favours to us. Quite an explosive player. Not sure where he's going to play. Initially, he was brought into play as a wing back. But I believe Lewington will, I believe he does prefer Tanai Watson, who's a bit more, whatever sort of signing, he's a bit more solid at the back, offers more structure, but also offers a bit of attacking quality down that right-hand side. Missed anyone else? Yeah, Scott Twine, bit of a maverick player, can do it all pretty much, and is very similar to Scott Fraser, actually. And when you look at the stats from last season, so at the time he wasn't a replacement, but of course now he is. So yeah, it's been a very good transfer window, and I think that's why the optimism is so high despite losing the manager and all his coaching staff.
I think one player that stood out for me last year, particularly in the two games when we played each other like in a week, I think it was the Pizza Cup, and then we played each other.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
3-0 and 2-2, if I remember rightly. And I remember specifically speaking to you about when you said you weren't too sure at the time, but whenever I watched him, I was quite impressed. Was Matt O'Reilly? Obviously, I think he was at Fulham previously as a young boy. I've seen him since then. I've been impressed. He's still on the side. Am I wrong in my judgment? You'll know better. You watch him every week, or has he improved since we last spoke?
No, he's very good. He's improved every game. Obviously, it helped that he had Scott Fraser alongside him, because Scott Fraser was that box-to-box midfielder who would do everything and let Matt O'Reilly focus on the creativity side of things. I think for Matt, it's all about adding goals to his game. Like a prime example last season was against Ipswich away. He should have scored a couple of goals, and I think he knows that himself. So, I think for this season for Matt, it's about doing the same, but also adding a bit more to your game. Funnily enough, his first goal opportunity this season has been a missed penalty against Tottenham in the pre-season friendly. So not the best start, but no, I've got full confidence in him to excel this year. And again, he's going to be in a team that's going to create loads of chances, and he's to do that for himself and also others. So yeah, him and Twine are quite an exciting duo to have just behind these Isa and Parrott.
There was one player I really, really wanted you to sign in the summer, and unfortunately it didn't happen. I think you would have been all right taking him as well, but we might as well get on to it because it's an interesting one. He's on the bench for us tonight. He came on, he scored in pre-season, but he scored in last pre-season. I think unless something dramatic happens, Will Grigg's Sunderland career is never going to take off, and he desperately needs to move. He did quite well at MK Dons. You brought in Mo Isa, you brought in Troy Parrott, so we kind of figured that the interest or any interest you had in Will's obviously gone. But what did you make of Will Grigg's time at MK last season?
When you look at the stats, it's not very impressive. I think it's like 8 goals and 20 appearances, but if you narrow it down to actual starts, it's very good. I think towards the start of his time, they had like 5 goal contributions in like his first 4 starts. And I think that was just credit to the system he was in. He was getting loads of chances, and him and Cameron Jerome were very good up front. I think Rochdale away was a good example of their partnership and how well they did. I think when it came to signing him, the club were definitely interested. I think Russell Martin was very clear on that interest. But when you can get the likes of Troy Parrott on loan, obviously Mo Isa came in, but he's been imagined to be more expensive than Grigg. Will Grigg just becomes a liability, unfortunately. I think there is a player in him. I think his performance last season showed that. But I think Sunderland is a relationship that just needs to move on. And clearly a lot of clubs, if you like we have a Kieran Agard, I suppose, a lot of clubs just are a bit traumatised by what they've seen at Sunderland and don't really want to take a chance on him. I think he needs an environment maybe a bit like Wigan, which was unfortunate for him as well. Another opportunity that he missed out on, where he's familiar, he knows the people there, and he scored loads of goals there because he's done it before. It's a difficult one because I think Russell was keen, so I think it would come down to probably price and his astronomical wages that I'm sure he's on at Sunderland that maybe put us off.
Yeah, I think he's on. I mean, I'm not going to put anyone's wages on a public podcast, but I think they were higher than people probably thought. And I'm not saying higher than people thought. I don't think people would be that surprised, to be fair. But obviously, I think I'd be very surprised if you said Will Grigg was the man you were worried about going into the game on Saturday, just based on how things go. But it's a question that I always ask and a question that I always enjoy the answer to. We've been decent in pre-season. We've won 2-2. All right, one's Port Vale with a second stringish team, but the Wigan win was a really good win. I'm sure you've seen the highlights. Who are the players you're concerned about going into the game on Sunday? Saturday?
Saturday. So hopefully it's Saturday. Ross Stewart's probably the main one. I think what I was saying to you was, Graham, that he's basically a summer signing in my eyes. Of course, he had the hamstring injury, as all Sunderland fans know, I'm sure, and didn't really get too many chances with Wyke up front. Now Deadwood Wyke's left the club. Ross Stewart's obviously come in and can really show his skill set. And of course, he scored against Wigan on the weekend. And I think our defence is really struggled with taller strikers that are a bit more physical and are also good at their feet. Our centre backs, especially Warren O'Hara at the centre, who last season was on the right hand side with Harry Darling in the centre. They can't switch roles this season so far. And that actually probably suits Ross Stewart more because he could, not that Warren's a weak defender or anything, but Stewart's a lot more physical than Warren and could probably have his way with him if he has a good game. I think, and with the defence, how it played against Bolton, especially if Fisher isn't going to be fit, which he's been training, but he's not actually played a game yet this season. That worries me a little bit. And of course, the attacking quartet of Mbgidi, Embleton, and players like that who even bloody who is it? Pritchard tonight. Pritchard came and got an assist against Port Vale. He's a good player on his day. There's a reason clubs like Huddersfield spent so much money on him a couple of seasons ago. He's clearly got the quality. So there's a lot of attacking talent in Sunderland, and I think Lee Johnson this season is his first full season. And a bit like our former gaffer Russell Martin, I think it could be a season where we finally see what Sunderland's really about. And I think it could be a lot of goals this season.
Fingers crossed, as you said that. Talking of goals, final question as always. Match prediction going into the game on definitely Saturday, definitely not Sunday, definitely Saturday.
I think it for me, it's the same as the Bolton game. I'll take anything in this game. I don't care how it comes or how we get it, quite frankly. I think there'll be goals. I think both teams are full of attacking talent and the defences are a bit suspect at the moment. So I'm going to go 2-2.
That's weird. That's what I'm going for as well. I'm going for a 2-2. Yeah, because we might have a left back. We still don't have a right back. We've got Callum Doyle, but we've also got Tom Flanagan, who I'd be surprised he had 2 good games in a week. I should probably not say that. I sat next to his brother-in-law at the game on Saturday, so I should probably not do that. But that's my honest opinion. But 2-2, I'd be happy with a draw. Might sound defeatist. Sunderland fans probably thinking, what? But I'd be happy with a draw. But I appreciate you coming on, mate, and pleased to have you back.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me again, Graham.
Awesome. Cheers.